During my recent playthrough of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, I came to a conclusion that I believe will surprise many of you. Edward Kenway, for as beloved a character as he is among AFC fans, is also a highly underrated and misunderstood protagonist. The reason many people describe for Edward being a successful character is because he is similar to Ezio Auditore. They say words like funny, charming, charismatic, a womanizer like Ezio, as if those were the only reasons why Ezio became such a great character in the first place. They've even coined phrases like the Ezio formula or Pirate Ezio. But truth be told, I never thought once, as I played the game, that Edward is similar to Ezio. We can all argue that Ubisoft wanted to make Edward an opposite to Connor, after the mixed reviews that Connor garnered among critics and fans alike. And yes, we can also say that Edward is more aligned to what people liked from Ezio, but reducing Edward to a clone of Ezio is kind of gross, an understatement of a character whose story arc could well be the greatest in the whole franchise. When you come to think about it, Edward is very dissimilar to Ezio. One of the greatest differences that Edward has from Ezio and all the other assassins is that Edward's story is not exactly a coming-of-age story in the classic sense, or a revenge plot, as many of the others are. Edward is just a man, a sailor, who wants to be rich. He loves his wife, but is not mature enough to be a husband, and his always permeating desire for wealth is reason enough for him to leave her. Caroline Scott, Edward's wife, is an element that neither of the other assassins present at the time, Altair, Ezio, and Connor, had. Neither of the three begins their story with a wife, so that is something that immediately changes Edward's narrative considerably. Unlike Altair, who was raised to be a killer since birth, or the revenge-driven Ezio, or the altruistic Connor, Edward is just a married man who is struggling between his love for Caroline and his own desires for wealth and glory. Edward begins his story completely oblivious of the Assassin-Templar conflict. He doesn't want revenge, and he doesn't want to grow strong to defend those he loves. All Edward wants is gold, and for as selfish as that sounds, that also makes Edward the most relatable of the four AC protagonists at the time. All of us that form the middle class or the outright poor have yearned at times for more wealth, so we all can, if not sympathize, at least understand Edward's point of view. It also made him, to me at first, the less likable of the four leads, but his evolution the more compelling. Contrary to Ezio, who was always a doer, Edward suffers greatly because of his inactions. His inability to accept that times are changing and that his pirate ways will not sustain him forever separate him completely from the more responsible and dutiful Ezio. While Ezio relinquishes his revenge and accepts his uncle's teachings, seeking and learning from the wisdom of Altair, and ultimately embracing his father's work and legacy, Edward runs from responsibility, running from his wife, scoffing frequently at Mary Reed's claims that he can be better than just a pirate, refusing to learn from the mistakes of his other pirate friends, and it is only after he has lost everything that he accepts the errors of his ways and seeks redemption, thus becoming the assassin he was meant to be, and a more responsible parent to Jenny Scott than he ever was as husband to her mother. In many ways, Edward is more similar to Connor than to the same Ezio, because similar to Connor, Edward also idealizes the idea of freedom. The difference between the grandfather and the grandson is that Edward idealizes freedom without accepting that with such liberty also comes great responsibility, while Connor, on the other hand, embraces the responsibilities from a very young age. However, he errs in the idea that every single person would do the right thing because he could and because he did. However, the beautiful thing about Edward's story, and what made him such a special, beloved and distinctive character in the franchise is that, contrary to the other assassins in the franchise, his association with the Brotherhood was fruitful. In more simple words, Edward is easily the only character in the franchise that was helped by the assassins and their creed. Through the whole story, we see a man that is lost, never happy with what he has, but always tormented by guilt, whether he admits it or not. He is not happy with his wife, seeking fame and fortune instead, but once he finds that fortune, he cannot enjoy it in peace because of guilt. He appreciates and respects Mary Read, but never reforms in time to make her efforts worth her while. Deep inside, he knows that the pirates are all wrong, but stubbornly chooses to be one of them. Men like Blackbeard, whom he regarded as a friend and mentor, and his other friends like Ben Hornigold, Calico Jack, and Charles Vane, serve as perfect examples to the hollowness of the life they are living, a selfish life without purpose and loyalty, and where relatively decent men die pointlessly. Once again, however, it's only after he's lost everything that he truly changes for the better. Another thing that makes Edward different from the other assassins in the franchise is that he became an assassin when he was a full-grown man. We have characters like Altair, who was raised by the Brotherhood since birth. Like Ezio himself said in Revelations, Altair's life was the assassin's. He had no other. Ezio himself joins the Brotherhood when he is 17, older than Altair of course, but still a young man with much life ahead. However, it is his grief and desires for vengeance what drives him into a conflict he will battle for 30 years on end, eventually realizing that he will never live to see the end of it. Even if Ezio had a better childhood than Altair, he never really knew much else aside of the Assassin Brotherhood and their creed. Afterwards, when he retires, he is too old to fully enjoy his new life with Sophia and her kids, spending most of that time in sickness and through depressing moments of forgetfulness. We have characters like Connor, whose sense of duty to his people and to all human race drives him to become an assassin at too early an age, before having the true experience to understand where he's getting into, and as such, the man commits a lot of mistakes throughout his journey. He trusts the wrong people, sometimes even for the wrong reasons, and, not really sure of the value of the Assassin's Creed, doubts the merits of the Brotherhood, and for a brief time entertains the idea of co-working with the Templars, if not for anything else, because he is naturally inclined to love and care for his father, his last living blood relative, and tries to open his mind to what the man has to say, even if it goes against the beliefs and the animosities he's harbored through most of his life. Connor's sense of duty and his need for a parental figure is what guides him, not the Assassins or the Templars and their particular creeds. Through both orders he could have protected his tribe. However, he originally became an assassin because of Achilles, and almost deviates because of Haytham. He is loyal to the Patriots because of Samuel Adams and George Washington. Right or wrong, Connor's position and worldviews are his own, and most of the time they are at odds with the Templars, the Patriots, and even the same assassins. His loyalties are to the people, not their creeds, and to what he perceives as right and wrong. Connor became an assassin mainly because he met Achilles first. Weird as it might sound, Connor would have become a Templar had he met Haytham before Achilles, and of course, had Charles Lee not given the boy such a horrible impression first. So in Connor's case, his life and affiliations to the Assassins was decided at an early age, and mainly because of the order around which things happened and he met each paternal figure. Edward, on the other hand, lived a life first before becoming an assassin. He was a young sailor first, infatuated by the most beautiful woman in the vicinity. He worked like a privateer, then became a looser pirate before briefly joining the Templar Order, until his own schemes and avarice ruins it for himself again. Afterwards, he helps Hornigold and Blackbeard build their pirate haven in Nassau, and spends a large amount of time living the life of the pirate, gathering enough plunder to last him a lifetime. Through most of this story we have the assassins, coming in and out of the game, now and then showing Edward that there is more to life than just goals and women of leisure. Even if at first Edward rebuffs them, he gradually learns from them, and his commitment to them, therefore, is very powerful when it happens, because this man, contrary to other assassins in the franchise, has lived and tasted the finer things in life. If in the end he chooses the assassin life and the family life above all else, it is because this man has truly grown and matured as a person, and through his own gathered wisdom has differentiated the Assassin's Creed as the most sound philosophy of all. This resolution was one he carried to his grave. We can see that in the Oliver Bowden book Assassin's Creed Forsaken, in which we see an older Edward who still believes in the assassins and their cause. In the narrative, Haytham recollects fondly the memories of his father, talking about freedom with a tinge of happiness and pride. And that is what makes Edward's story so beautiful, in contrast to the other characters. The Assassin's Creed guided Edward from a selfish pirate to a selfless man that is bent on doing the right thing for the right reasons. Contrary to the other characters, whose closing scenes in their respective stories are those of sadness, pain and regret, we see Edward in happiness, at the opera with his kids, wizened but satisfied. In the end, Edward Kenway tells his own differing story, and to reduce him to a clone of Ezio is kind of lame. I really enjoyed making this video. Black Flag was one of my biggest surprises this year, one of those things that leave a lasting yet positive impact. Make sure to like and subscribe, and hit the bell, because I will certainly make more content regarding the Assassin's Creed games, whether tutorials or reflections around this versatile franchise. I'd like you to tell me what you think about Edward Kenway, and whether or not you like him and why. Tell me your opinion regarding this character, and the others I mentioned here. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, so go ahead, talk to me. Now, I have to go, but we will meet again in this year or the next. In the meantime, I want you to stay safe and have a great rest of your day and or night. I also wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
They're sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that ere I've loved, they'd wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should, I'll gently